Last week, we started discussing Unit 2 and the end goal of the unit, which is the problem solution argument. The key to your success with this essay will begin with your research. Not only will you have to find said research, you'll also have to organize it and finally synthesize what your sources say with not only your ideas, but with the ideas presented in your various sources. At the heart of that organization is your annotated bibliography. I assume that at some point in your English 111 careers, you've compiled and composed an annotated bibliography. So for some of you, and most of you, I hope, this is review. But if it's not, if this is new, that's okay. So what is an annotated bibliography? An annotated bibliography describes, gives publication information for, and evaluates each work on a list of sources. They're useful in that they allow you to compile your research, understand the content of your various sources, and organize your ideas before actually writing a paper. An annotation can be useful for any kind of text. Journal articles, book chapters, news articles, interviews, or whatever form of text your source happens to be. So what is an annotation? An annotation simply means a brief summary or description of a text. And annotations typically take two forms, descriptive or evaluative. The kind of annotation I'm asking you to do is an evaluative one. Evaluative annotations, briefly in 150 words or one paragraph, do a couple of things. They describe the source and they provide critical assessment where you discuss the source's credibility, the writer's background, the credentials, and you also consider the usefulness of that source to your purpose or your argument. When composing your annotated bibliography or your annotation, you have to provide three essential parts in this order. The first is an APA citation, where you provide the citation information, a summary, and an evaluation. There is a color-coded example of an annotated bibliography in Canvas that I hope you guys will look at. But I'd like to take the opportunity to review each of these essential components. Your citation is simply the bibliographic information of the source in the desired documentation style. And for this essay and for this unit, we will be focusing on APA format. You can see the APA tips video that's included in this module for more guidance on helping you form those citations. The next major component of your annotation is your summary. And all the summary basically does is describes the content of the source in your own words. In 1 to 2 sentences, you want to explain the argument or arguments the author makes, what the main point of the article is, and explain that source in your own words. And by summarizing the source, it allows you to show that A, you've understood what you've read, but beyond that, if you can explain the content and arguments made in that article, you'll be better able to synthesize and use that information appropriately when writing your essay. So a summary is a brief explanation of what the article is about in your own words. The next essential piece of your annotation is the heart of that annotation. It's the evaluation portion, and this is the bulk of your annotation. First, you always want to consider what a source means for your argument. Consider how it fits or aligns with the other sources you're annotating. Are there any overlaps? Are there any agreements or disagreements? And you also want to figure out if this source is useful. If it's not useful, it probably doesn't need to be in your annotated bibliography in the first place. But if it is useful, what role will it play in your paper? Beyond figuring out the usefulness of a source, you really want to assess the source's credibility. And the easiest way to do that is to think about the crap. Get your crap together. And this acronym stands for all of the items you want to identify and address in the annotation, beginning with currency. You want to tell me when the article was published. Doing so indicates the timeliness of the source, and it also aligns with its relevancy. If it was published, is it up to date? If it's out of date, how is it still relevant? Relevancy just basically indicates how a source relates to your claim or position and your overall argument. If it's not relevant, again, like its usefulness, it's probably not going to find a place in your article or in your paper or your annotated bibliography to begin with. Also essential in the evaluation is acknowledging the name of the author or the authority, his or her credentials or qualifications, and affiliations. You want to indicate where they work, what's their position, what's their knowledge base or background. How does this make them an authority or establish their reliability? In other words, do these things make them trustworthy or experts in their field or on a given issue or topic? And assessing the authority can also help you gauge the accuracy of the source's information. This is particularly important when looking at non-scholarly sources like newspapers, magazines, websites, or any source that hasn't gone through the peer review process. You can tell whether a source is popular or scholarly by noting the publication information. And there are two P's that you want to consider with the evaluation. And the first is the publication information. Where was this information originally published? Does it come from a scholarly source like an academic journal? Or is it a popular source like the New York Times or Time Magazine, the Washington Post? Based on the answer to that question, you'll be able to address the article's purpose. Scholarly publications typically always focus on presenting new concepts, ideas, or research to a specialized group or audience. They have undergone the peer review process, which means that their information is accurate and up to date. Whereas popular sources like the New York Times, anything from newspapers or magazines, they reach a wider public. They're not written by quote unquote experts in their field, and there's almost always an inherent bias based on the readership. Because remember when we were doing the rhetorical analysis and I said to figure out the audience, the target audience, the intended audience, it's always important to look at where an article was published, because that's going to tell you a lot about the typical readership of that source. So for example, the New York Times typically has a liberal based bias, whereas something like the Wall Street Journal or the Richmond Times-Dispatch typically has a more conservative stance. So figuring out the readership helps you to illuminate, not eliminate, biases, because biases are not a bad thing. They're natural. We all have them. Any kind of part of a conversation has a biased position in some way or another. They're only bad. Biases are only bad when they go unrecognized and unaccounted for. And acknowledging those biases is crucial for you when moving into writing your own argument. So that's an annotated bibliography in a nutshell. You want to keep in mind that you need to include your citation, your summary, and your evaluation. But just to give you a clearer picture of what it is that I'm looking for, the kind of annotations that you'll want to produce, I have an example here. And it is color coded for your visual enjoyment. And the first thing that I'm supposed to have, right, is my APA citation up front right here. My APA citation, and I know that it is APA citation format because of how the author's name is noted, the way that the year is noted, the way the title is formatted. I highly recommend you looking at my APA tips video. So APA citation is a beast, and writing those citations are tricky at best. So I highly encourage you all to look at my tips video. But moving beyond the citation, the next thing you'll notice is my summary. And my summary says this article discusses the influence of religion on the legislative behavior of senators. It analyzes religion's impact on senators on the basis of religious belonging, beliefs, and behavior. The article explains that religion will forever be a staying power in political issues. So very briefly, in a couple of sentences, this student has summarized the basic gist of that one article. Beyond that, you'll see that the majority of this paragraph is in this kind of blue color, which is the evaluative portion. So remember, you've got to address the elements of crap when it was published. This peer-reviewed article issued in 2018 was published by Wiley Blackwell, a top-tier publishing company. So in that one sentence, she has told me that it is up to date, or it was up to date in the time that she read this essay. It was published in 2018, and by publishing standards, 2018 is relatively new. It's less than 2 years old. She's also told me that it is a peer-reviewed article, so it comes from some sort of scholarly journal, the journal for the scientific study of religion. She explains that this article is fairly up to date, and because it is peer-reviewed, the content is accurate. The author, the authority, Daniel Arnon, is affiliated with the Department of Political Science at Emory University. He holds an MA in political science, etc. So I've got his credentials, his affiliations, and I've also got that he is a member of the American Political Science Association for the scientific study of religion. So his credentials show that he is an expert researcher, and that also makes this source credible. Beyond that, she talks about how this article is relevant to her position or her argument because it provides insight, political insight to religious influence. It is linked to my other sources that relay the effect of religion on society. I plan to use this article to evince the power of religion in society. So in this one article, she has told me what the article is about. She's told me where I can find it, and she's evaluated it for its credibility and its usefulness for her in this essay. So that's what I'm looking for you guys to do. Please take a look at the full color-coded annotation sample, and we will be talking about some various research tips this week when we have our librarian come to visit us in class and give us some key useful tricks for finding sources that are relevant to your essays and that they are not necessarily national issues. They are more localized and specific to us as Virginians, or us as in the kind of Fredericksburg, Stafford, Metro DC area. So I am looking forward to seeing what kind of research that you guys come up with, and keep this in mind when moving and starting your research process, because the annotated bibliography is going to be an essential and helpful tool when moving forward.